Resident Graphics Wizard Brad, he's been doing amazing stuff. So the most recent amazing thing is Brad has been converting things that are off in the distance into a single quad. So like these really complicated objects that whenever they get a little bit farther away, you don't need to spend that much effort rendering them. So he converted those things to a little, it's basically like a little sticker. And that little sticker is super cheap for us to draw. More and more objects are in the distance than there are up close, because that's just how the real world works, right? So there's tons of stuff off in the distance. We want that to be extra cheap. It's amazing.
What does that mean for the community? Guys, it means that the game will have a higher FPS. And it's also some tech that we would leverage for seeing far distances. I mean, we think that, if you need to have in Mirandus some of those places which are vantage points and you can see something in the distance and be like, whoa, what's that? And try to make your way over there. I mean, that's just part of coolness.
How much better is it? Well, it actually cut our draw call count in half. So it means that lower end hardware is going to be able to play the game, or at least it'll be more consistent frame rate no matter where you go. Cool. So there's a demonstration video that we want to show you.
The way this works, if I go over here to scene view, you can see that the player is rendering the scene over and over again from many different positions. So
I love this.
There's actually a grid that is broken up, that breaks up the level, and the grid is actually all these cubes. And so the way this works is that there's depending on where the player is, what they're looking at, the time of day, how far, how near, and whatnot, the environment gets rendered onto these cards. And then those cards can be faded in and out with the real geometry to optimize the level and the rendering. Yeah, so here is an example of Narrow's Landing where the background mountains are rendered to a cube map. And as I change the time of day, the cube map texture is trying to keep up with the current lighting. So here it's nighttime and it's black. If I go to the daytime instantly, you can see the mountains are black, but they quickly fade in. So the idea here is that we can take a highly detailed vista scenery in the distance and render that to a texture, and then that can update and change with the lighting conditions. But it's simply rendering a cube, very, very fast and easy to create very complicated backgrounds.
And that's what you were seeing is it was drawn at nighttime, and then we switched it to daytime just so you can kind of identify like there's something happening there, and it fades it from the nighttime to the daytime pretty quickly. So that again is another way for us to make our frame rate more regular but not lose any detail in the distance. So that's pretty amazing. So let's kind of blow through a few of these real quick. Eric has been working on doing all sorts of cool AI behavior changes, and AI is kind of hard to look at and immediately identify what these things are doing, but we actually have a pretty good video here.
I'm going to show an example of how AIs dynamically figure out what to do instead of us telling them what to do specifically. In the inspector, watch the behavior input scores and the behavior output scores. Everything that AIs can do is now prioritized dynamically based on what's happening around them. When they attack, they think about what their health is, how many allies are nearby. When they eat, they wonder how far away food is and how hungry they are. Also notice that herbivores like deer want to stay away from wolves now, and wolves want to stay away from goblins. I'm going to cut it to the goblin camp. When I get to the goblin camp, I'm going to disappear. And I want you to watch what happens to goblins and the wolf. Everybody wants to attack me right now. As I disappear, notice that the wolf runs away. Notice also that the goblins go into wander behavior, sort of like an investigate. After there aren't any threats for a certain amount of time, they'll decide that their priority is to return to base. All of this is done with inputs and output weights, where we guide their priorities instead of us telling them what to do.
This is just showing that they have a lot of different ideas on what they could do, and they're picking those things based on the context.
It's the foundation for the simulation. What we're trying to do is make you guys believe that you are observing a fantasy world. So, this is the foundational stuff that we have to stand up to ensure that a wolf is running around, and then it gets hungry. Then it tries to hunt a deer, or you if you get close. The concept of food, the concept of sleep, the concept of what do these things want to do with their lives and in their spare time? What is their internal drive? That's what creates a living landscape. So you guys never quite know exactly where everything is or what it's going to do. And that's just part of creating the adventure in the natural world. So these are massive, big technical steps.
The last tech test, NPCs didn't really know anything about the world. They had a nav mesh, and the nav mesh was it was quickly thrown together. It's not something we spent a lot of time on. We just wanted them to be able to path around. So a few of the things that we did now is like we have a real nav mesh, and this real nav mesh is allowing us to have things like bridges and underpasses and and multi-level buildings, perhaps. It also means that we have some concept of collision in the server that matches what you see when you're running around playing the game in the client. So that's a big deal, because now we can cast a trajectory through the world and know, oh, this is not going to hit the target because it hits a rock, or you're shooting through a wall, or you're firing it into, you're trying to hit somebody in a chasm that you can't make it because you're going to clip the corner. So there's all these different things that we needed to know on the server before we could actually do anything that's really approximate to projectiles. But now that we have that, we can do projectile combat. And it's still pretty early, but it's starting to show some promise. A video here that's going to show what happens whenever arrows become finite. And we're doing that on the client so that you'll run out of arrows. Monsters are probably going to run out of arrows too. Don't know for sure. They're going to run out?
Well, I don't know. That's a big discussion. That's a big discussion.
That is. Well, imagine what happens if you could sit there and tease out somebody shooting at you for a while, and then he has to switch to melee and then come after you.
You could run out of arrows. An arrow is shot at you by a goblin. You could pick it up, load it into your bow, and shoot it back, which would be pretty crazy.
One of the things we're working on right now is to know what the metadata is for the materials in the world, so that we know hardness versus softness and whether it should shatter an arrow or not. So when you embed an arrow in a stone, it's going to break almost certainly. But if you stick it in a person, it might or might not break. Or if you jam it in the mud, it's probably going to be fine. So that's the next couple of steps. We're going to build it. We're going to see if it's fun. But let's roll one of these videos. I think it's video number 3. Yeah?
So we have the new ammo system. Now you can equip ammo to the ammo slot, and you will be required to have ammo when you fire up your bow. It will now fire the arrow that you have equipped. And you can see that I fired 2 shots. Now I'm down to 3. It was at 5. Now, if I fire the last arrow, I'm on my last arrow now. If I fire that, it should automatically try to equip this new stack of 5 of the same type of arrow. So there we go. And it has equipped that new stack. So I fire that last arrow. I now have nothing left. It hasn't automatically equipped this. You still see the visual arrow here. This is something we're going to have to fix later, but it won't let you fire. It'll just not produce an arrow when you fire at that point. And now I could equip the new fire arrows here. Fire some of those. They look the same visually right now. You can see I've got a new stack of 5 in my inventory. I've got my 7 here. And just like the other arrow, when I fire that last one, it's going to equip the new stack of fire arrows because it's the same type of the last arrow that you fired off. So
Captain had a question, and that is, yeah, in the last tech test, arrows were infinite, but we don't want them to be infinite. We want them to be things that you craft. And by doing that, what we can do is we can tune them as they're more difficult to acquire. We can tune them to be closer to, what we would assign as the value and the damage that an actual arrow would do. I want to remind you guys too that what you're seeing here, these are not super cool, amazing videos that we put together to blow people's minds. This is actually what we show at the end of our month. Like, hey, we're demonstrating the technical progress. And what happens is the tech gets stood up. For those of you who have not been following Mirandus and are watching this maybe for the first time, this is what we've been doing all along throughout the development, is just sharing where things are at and talking through the sausage, as we say, getting a glimpse into the factory.
One big discussion we're having is arrows are not infinite. So you craft them. Can you pick it up, right? If it didn't break. And if you can pick it up, can someone else pick it up?
Arrow stealing.
Cool.
How cool would it be to be that guy at the golf course who doesn't golf, but you just have a scuba suit and you go into the pond and you're collecting someone else's balls?
One of the things that I believe, and I think the team believes, is that, the more rules we put in, the more the game kind of sucks. So I think we're always inclined to try to repeal rules and see how that feels first and see what catches fire from a gameplay standpoint. So I don't know. It's something we'll engage you guys in, when we start getting to that, like trying to lock that decision. But, let me know in Discord, guys, if you guys are watching it. If you shoot an arrow, should someone else be able to pick it up? Now, I know that sounds like it sucks, but when you're out of arrows and you look down and there's one in the grass, you'll be stoked that you can pick it up and have more shots.
So if it wasn't clear why in that last video we allow you to equip one type of arrow and keep shooting it, is that we assume if you equip a particular kind of arrow, you're okay with shooting it, but we don't want to switch you to a different type of arrow. Because you could have a regular arrow that you're like, I know I've got 300 or 400 of them, bunch of stacks of them, bam, 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 bam. And then you fire off another arrow. You don't want that to accidentally be the arrow of doom that you've been saving for 6 months.
I love these comments in Discord right now. Punjab's like, Could you sell a used arrow? Could you? It's like, do you see by repealing that rule, suddenly so many interesting things, has a saying, hey, for scavengers, or hey, for, outcats, like people should be able to pick up your arrows. I mean, now you might have an incredibly powerful arrow being shot by a high level player taking out a large beast, and some really low level players risking their life just hoping they can steal one arrow. But mostly you're getting to watch them be crushed by an epic level beast. Ongoing pushes, guys, and we're getting pretty close to this, is the entire game needs to be data driven, and have your game and the tuning of your game live in Excel sheets or CSVs. And that kind of lists out every object in the game. They have a unique ID. You can change their name. And then all of their stats and even their behaviors can be written. Essentially, the data can drive the game. We can make changes very quickly when we're tuning it, and we can avoid little errors that could pop up by doing some error checking to that data when it gets pushed out, beyond the CSV. The way that we can stay fast and get more content into the game, guys, is by being data driven. That's an ongoing push, and we're getting pretty close to having most stuff in the game be data driven. So that's rad. We had to blur the shit out of that last image, huh? Guys, I bet there's some algorithm they could run to like unblur that. Is that possible?
Yes, it is.
Should we have shown that?
Absolutely.
Cool. Next, bits. So this is gray boxing, guys. Matt, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, sure. What's really important is we start figuring out like where things are spatially, and that's a visual thing, but it's also a playtest thing. Like we get in and we run around it, we feel how it is. Ultimately, this is going to, before we can ever graduate to really beautifying it, it's got to feel right to play inside of. And one of the things that we can utilize is once we have spaces like this figured out and we know how it's supposed to play, we can grab moments from them and concept right on top of them so that we can preserve the play and then figure out exactly how they're going to feel. And you're seeing the work from a lot of different people. So the level of detail people put in is kind of all over the board, but the intention's really consistent about what are the inputs here we're trying to showcase, and some of it might be lore.
All of them have names. It's really important to us, guys. We don't make zones for zones' sake. There is a lore and a narrative tied throughout the world, and the zones are a part of that. It's always tough because we want to show you cool stuff we're doing, but we don't want to ruin the adventure or surprise of it all. So next we have some new animals and critters. Matt, you want to talk about those guys? These creatures, guys, everything serves a purpose in the game. We're trying to make the world filled with things that would have an output or that are engaging with the other creatures of the world in some meaningful way. So check them out.
And we are, when we're developing, we're looking at real biomes in real life, the animals that would live there in real life. And we're trying to figure out like what things make sense in the world. At the same time, as you saw, if any of you guys saw the last presentation with just art, we're talking about like, how do we make sure this feels like the real world?
A lot of the things that we were missing in the last playtest was environmental ambience,
Yeah. Now, what we're seeing here is actually, we have a new effects artist who just joined our team, and he's absolutely impressive and amazing. And he's been going through and helping us establish what the look and feel for our effects in the game will look like. And that can be everything from fires. We always start with something fundamental like fires and waters, things that are tangible that we can use as a balance to see how these visuals will look compared to the environmental ones that you guys just looked at. And so this is just a very early tease of some of what's to come and how we're going to be leveling up the environments through the effects that you'll see.